Rubber is a very unique movie. This is a 2010 movie, made in France but in the English language, and it's an ultra dark horror comedy. This film is very meta and very artsy. It plays on the tropes of traditional genre-based films and is very deliberately self-deprecating and kind of plays up the idea that stuff in the movie doesn't really matter, there's no real reason for any of it, just enjoy the ride. Now, some people will view this movie as total trash, that's a complete waste of time to watch. I personally have watched this film a couple of times, and I really enjoy it. It's the kind of movie which I would definitely bring to a party with loads of people there who are planning to watch a movie. It's the kind of film that's perfect for sparking up conversation, it's worth a laugh, and it's weird, but in a really good way. Now, the movie doesn't really star anyone of overwhelming note. You may recognise one or two people from different things, but in general, there are no real big names in this movie. But that's kind of a good thing, because they don't need to be. Now, this film could very easily be cheap and terrible. And some people would probably say that it is the latter, but the production quality, for one thing, about this movie is really good. The soundtrack, for instance, is fantastic. The cinematography is beautiful in this film, and I personally found it quite remarkable that the director, as well as everyone else involved in the film, managed to make a movie about a killer tire that's not just interesting to watch, but actually looks good. The idea of a tyre rolling down the road isn't exactly most people's idea of a good-looking scene. But the combination of the great soundtrack, the great cinematography, the shots, and also the way that the character of the tyre itself is given so much personality due to the way it moves, that you actually feel like this inanimate ring of rubber is actually a character. And to me personally, that is the most impressive thing by far about this movie. The fact that the tyre has a personality, which is such a ridiculous thing to say, and yet if you've watched the movie, I think you'll probably know exactly what I mean. This tyre has the power to carry a film, and in the case of this movie, I think it does. Now, the story itself is kind of inconsequential in a movie like this. It's about a killer tyre, that's all you really need to know. If you start to explain the plot of this film, you really get twisted all over the place very quickly. It's not difficult to understand, it's just very deliberately ridiculous, and the opening shot of the movie presents that perfectly. No, I won't spoil it, just watch the film. Within the first 5 minutes, you'll know exactly what you're in for. A film that deliberately makes very little sense, and just has fun with that concept. But I have to say, I really wanted to enjoy this film. I loved the concept behind it, and I was so pleased when I finally did watch it that it was every bit as silly, as ridiculous, as funny, as absurd, but also as well made as I wanted it to be. This is a film that takes a B-movie concept, but gives it the kind of quality that you'd expect from something like an Oscar film. It looks fantastic, sounds fantastic, the performances given obviously aren't Oscar-worthy, but they are good. The actors in the film are all great. Overall, it's a movie which is very difficult to explain or go into without spoiling stuff, but suffice to say, there's gore, there's humour, there's plenty of absurdity in the film, and if you're into that kind of thing, or if you're just looking for something that really is totally unique, like no other movie I've ever seen, then this definitely delivers that. Now, this movie had a budget of only $500,000, and for that I have to say, I'm seriously impressed by what they could do with this film. But enough of the overview, what about the individual review points? Well, first of all, there's the story and plot. And to say that this film even has a story or plot is really stretching it, because technically it does, but it doesn't really have one, it doesn't really need one. That's not what a movie like this is about. It manages to be artsy and kind of pretentious, but in a way that isn't pretentious. It's actually kind of charming. And I like that, because I don't really like artsy films, but I really enjoyed this one. So overall, for the story and plot, I'm going to give the film a generous 7, because really, it isn't that good. The story isn't phenomenal, but I'm giving it a 7 because it dared to be so ridiculously different that for me, it actually worked. The magic is there. Now, as far as the next point, we have the characters and motivations. And as I said, the primary character is the tyre. If you get that right, nothing else matters. And in the case of this film, not only do they get that right, but they do get all of the other characters right as well. They're all interesting, they have their own quirks, their own motivations, and although some of them aren't really fleshed out that much, they're all likeable in their own weird way. So for the characters overall, I'm going to give the film an 8. As far as the visuals and effects, again, I'm going to give the film an 8 because, as I already said, the shots in this film are gorgeous. The cinematography in general I absolutely loved, and it's very artistic visually. You can tell that that French flair is present, and there is gore in this film as well, and it's very enjoyable. It's completely camp, very B-movie, but at the same time looks great, will give you a laugh, and is enjoyable. So overall, I'm going to give the special effects and the overall look of the film an 8. As far as the audio and soundtrack, perhaps surprisingly, unless you've seen the movie, I'm giving it a 10, because the music in this film in particular I absolutely loved. It's joyous, it's weird, it's strangely appropriate, even though technically you're playing music to a tyre rolling down the road. How could anything be appropriate to that? But it really is. And the only way to really appreciate why I'm giving it a 10 is to just check out the film. But the music is fantastic. I really enjoy it. I like the sound design in general, but it really is the music that carries that score. And finally, for the most subjective, of course, as always, the rewatchability and entertainment factor. And for that, I'm again going to be really generous and give it a 9, because it's definitely not a film for everyone. Most certainly not. Some people will hate this film. Some will think, what was the point of that? What on earth did I just watch? In fact, to be honest, everyone will think, what on earth did I just watch? The only thing that divides people is where your mind goes after asking that question. For me personally, the next question was, shall I watch that again? And the answer was yes. For other people, it will be, what was the point of that? I'm never watching that again. So, depending on the type of person you are, of course, as with pretty much any film, you have to decide for yourself. It's just that this film, and some others like it, to say like it is a very broad term, tend to divide people in a much more obvious, clear and quick way. Overall, for me personally, I love the film. I love everything about the film, the look, the sound, the story, or lack thereof, and the absurdity of it all just was perfect to me. It's exactly what I wanted from the movie, and it delivered everything that I wanted and everything that I didn't know that I wanted from it. So overall for me, it's a 9, but that definitely won't be the case for everyone. Overall though, that gives this film a pretty high score, which some people will not agree with, of 4.1 out of 5, and I thoroughly agree with that score. I'm very pleased that it scored so highly, and it really does deserve it in my book, if not for anything else, just for how unique it is. So overall, if you haven't checked out this movie, as loads of people certainly haven't, most people haven't even heard of it, let alone checked it out, then I would urge you to do so. You don't necessarily need to be a horror fan to like this film. It really isn't based around the concept of horror. It has horror in it, but it's not really a horror film. It's an absurdist comedy that happens to have horror in it. So definitely check it out as far as I'm concerned. But that's it overall for this particular review. If, of course, you have seen this film, I would love to hear your thoughts, positive or negative, down below, and many of them probably will be negative. But for now, that's it. So as always, thanks for watching.